have the privilege of having served in an organized church setting for the last 15 years. And there are many blessings to serving in the organized church. And one of those blessings is being able to see the faithfulness of God continuing on from one generation to the next. And you see how the Lord moves and works through the life of the church. Another one of those peculiar blessings of serving in a church is meetings, and lots of meetings. Okay, so maybe I'm being a little bit sarcastic right now. But one thing that I've noticed about meetings is that when we're in a room together, we've all got our different perspectives, and we all believe that we're working towards the same goal. And then when we come back maybe a month or two later and we talk about where we were at a month ago, each person has a bit of a different skew and a bit of a different angle about what we talked about previously. And it's easy for me to be able to kind of go, well, those people just remember wrong. But if I'm really honest with myself, I'm just as guilty of that as well, where I put my own skew and my own angle, and as time goes by, I revision a number of the things that we had discussed as a body. And it's within human nature to tweak and revision things according to what we believe and where we anchor and our perspective on life. And not only is that true within a meeting setting or a church setting, it's also true in our relationship with God. And that moves us to some of the next points about why it's important to journal. So I'm doing these things a little bit out of order from what you see in the notes below. And I'm doing that because my own bent and my own perspective on this is, I think number 6 really highlights a really important foundation about who we are as human beings. So the 6th point that's listed below about the importance of journaling is that we have a tendency as human beings to revision history. That as time goes by, we're going to see things gradually differently, into which things can warp off just by a few degrees, but as time goes on, it can be 15, 20, maybe even a completely 180 degrees different from where it was when it started. And that's part of what our mind does. Our mind is built in such a way where we try and keep having stories or a grid work for us to understand life in, and as things come and change, we keep renegotiating that grid work and that framework, and sometimes our mind deceives us, and we even remember things differently as a result of the new grid work that we're trying to adapt. And that is true as well for our faith journey, that there is a tendency in our minds to reshape and review things based on where we're at right now and forget what God has said in the past. And I think that's vitally important for us when we're on our faith journey, to realize how our mind can quickly deceive us and revise what God has said to us. Because throughout the history of the church, there has been tons of revisions of what God has revealed, which has led to heresies, which has led to destruction and downfall not only of people, but of entire congregations. So we need to remember the words of Jeremiah, that the heart, and I would say that would also go with the mind, is deceitful above all else. It is beyond cure. Writing things down helps us keep anchored into the truth of what God has said. And so with that being established there, now I feel, okay, let's jump back to point 5. And point 5, I think, is just really good communal exercise. It helps us to rehearse, us as individuals as well as us as a community, what God has done. And as we keep saying that, then there's that chance for us to say, oh yeah, do you remember when? Do you remember when? Like, have you ever had those chances when you're sitting around a campfire with old friends and you're recounting old stories and you're just laughing and having a good time? Journaling is a foundation for that within the community of faith, where we as believers can say, hey, do you remember back when this happened and that happened? And as I've come here to this congregation in Brighton, I've been here for about 5 years, there have been many stories that people have shared with me as if I was a member around the campfire a dozen years ago or so, or even beyond that. I've heard incredible stories about, hey, do you remember when our church was doing the building renovation and this happened? And do you remember when there was this vision about starting the Beacon Youth Drop Center and that happened? And there's this collective excitement in which together we rehearse the story of God's faithfulness in our community. And that rehearsing then builds your faith, it builds a sense of community and prepares you as an entire community to be able to go forward in greater obedience to what God has called you to do. And from that place of rehearsing, it grows what I would call credibility. Integrity. And that's really what the 7th point is that it grows our capacity to have a trustworthy and a faithful witness about what God has said and God has done. As we share our own discipleship journey, it gains greater traction for others who may be wondering, can I actually follow him or her as he or she is following Christ? And as we journal and we share more about that, it'll demonstrate that yes, that person has legitimate, verifiable faith that has been tested, that they have seen the faithfulness of God God. They attest to the faithfulness of God, and in which then people will be willing to go, I want to journey with that person. And so it brings validity to the witness that we have. And to close off with number 8, I want to share with you Psalm 145, verse 4. It says, "One generation will commend the works to the next. They will tell of your mighty acts." And so if you have children, inherently, I think that you would probably see the value and the importance of that. And if you don't have children, I hope that you would see the value of handing something down to the next generation, whether they're your biological children or not. There's an incredible power in having a lasting legacy that proclaims the goodness of God from one generation to the next. So a few things for us to consider as we close out from here. So first of all, write down something that stood out to you. And I hope you just get in that practice of just writing stuff down that stands out to you. Because when the Spirit prompts and makes something catch your attention, that's not me and my words. That's the Spirit of Christ saying, hey, write this down, not because of anything about who He is, but because of what I want to say to you in this. And so when you write something down, and again, it'll give you an opportunity to come back to it later on, whether it's weeks, months, or even years later. The second thing I invite you to do is as you looked over the notes below, just write them down. Remember those 4 points about why journaling is important, because those 4 points will be helpful in your faith journey. The final thing I invite you to write down is to write down how journaling can help your discipleship journey when you are discipling others. There's a benefit that God is giving to us in our witness and testimony. Why don't you just write something down about what stood out with you on that? So in your journal, build on what we talked about yesterday. Just continually writing down a litany or a list of different things that God has done in your life. It's a beautiful gift of just remembering the goodness of God in your life. And review a few of the key passages that we have with this Abide series. John 15, verse 5, Romans 12, verses 2, as well as the Great Commission found in Matthew 28, verses 18 through 20. All right, wrapping it up. Just take a little bit of time and read Matthew 7, verses 24 through 29. And again, just practice some of the daily devotional practices that we have with those words. Thank you very much, and God bless you.